Hi everyone, good day, good morning, depending on what time of the day you're obviously watching this and depending on what part of the world you're in. I'm KK Diaz, and today I'm featuring Stephen Carlton, one of my colleagues, and he's here to share with us some wisdom, some tips, some trends around customer experience. Stephen is somebody that I met at Customer Experience World in 2018 in Cape Town, and we've kind of been friends, we've been following each other. Once in a while we check in with each other and see what's happening. So I thought, let me do an interview with him so I can share him with you guys, because I know you guys are just like me. We're always looking for ways to see what's happening in the world and how we can learn from others and actually implement what works so we can make our businesses a lot more competitive. So Stephen, welcome to the show, and I really appreciate you making the time. How you been?
Great, KK. It's so good to see you again and reconnect. I've been busy, but just had a nice holiday, so I'm recharged for the new year.
Fantastic. Happy New Year, just by the way.
Same to you.
Great. So please tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Again, my name's Stephen Carlton. I have my own consultancy called Customer Matters, and it's the intersection of customer experience and operations. My background and my career has been very operational. I served in the military in the US for a number of years, flew helicopters, got into continuous improvement, Lean and Six Sigma there. I took that into my corporate career as well, working in high tech in Silicon Valley for Sun Microsystems, which is a large computer software and hardware company. Moved industries to Genentech, biotech company. Found out I didn't really like that industry and wanted to get back to high tech, so I went back to Apple and did about a year there, and then spent about 5+ years at eBay, where I learned a lot about e-commerce and customer experience, and that's really where I got into customer experience and started to combine those two, and left eBay about 2.5 years ago and started my own consultancy, and have been doing work around that with clients since.
Fantastic. I love your company name, by the way, Customer Matters. That's such an appropriate name for what you do. I love how you've had the experience to work with companies like eBay and Apple and so on. Can you share with the audience just what that world entails and then the work that you did with and some of those companies?
Oh gosh, yes. I would say the biggest foray into customer experience started when I was at Apple, and then spilled over into my eBay time. Prior to that, I was mostly an operational person. And when I say operations, a lot of people think of manufacturing, but when I say operations, it's any part of the business, anything that involves processes, anything that you can make work better, cheaper, faster, and so that's fun because I hate waste, but it's not everybody's thing. So I needed to find a way at eBay to get people engaged rather than just doing things for the sake of doing them better, cheaper, faster. If there was a reason there, and that reason is the customer and the customer's happiness and their loyalty toward eBay, then maybe I could get my colleagues inside the company to actually care a little bit more about improving things instead of just improving them for their own sake. They're improving them so that they can create a better experience for the customer. And so that's really what I have been focused on for probably the past 6 years. And prior to that, it was really just making things work better, cheaper, faster. This is more fun.
Great. Now that's a nice segue for I guess for the main topic of the day. Can you tell the audience about what really is customer experience?
Well, there's a saying in our field that because there's a tendency to confuse customer experience with customer support or customer service. People hear customer experience and they think, oh, that's just when I dial 1-800 or whatever the number is to get help, kind of like you're waiting to do today. Yes. And what we say is customer service or customer support happens when the customer experience breaks down. So everything leading up to that time when you might contact a company for help is really the customer's experience. And that even extends beyond when you have a relationship. It's even, how do I discover that you exist as a company? And what is my, am I drawn in to investigate more and then start my relationship with you? And then once I decide that I'd like to do business with you, whether that's purchase something from a retail store, how is that experience? Or is it online? How is that experience? Is it easy? Is it seamless? If I have a problem, is it no problem? Do you take care of me? So it's every bit, it's the totality of all of the interactions that a person has with the business.
Wonderful. I love that. I'm so going to quote you on that. Now, as a country in South Africa, and you've been here, and if I'm not mistaken, possibly one or more other African countries. And let me speak to my experience, and you can sort of touch on that. We don't necessarily have a key focus around customer experience, I would say. If just by the way, Mahauta from the Complaints Commission was on radio yesterday or the day before, and she was talking about how she has handled close to 5,000 complaints in a very short space of time. And I guess it speaks to the point I'm trying to make here, which is we don't have the best of customer experience focus as a country and in terms of companies. And so my question to you is how do we motivate companies to be a lot more focused on customer experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are a couple real driving forces, and one is more of a macroeconomic force, which is maybe the economy is more mature and there's competition. Because if, let's say you have a relationship with a company, let's say it's the telephone company, and it's the only telephone company, that's the only way you can get your telephone service, which is the way it is in many countries and was in the United States for so long. Your company doesn't really care that much how well they serve you because you're a captive audience. And so when I say a mature or evolving marketplace, it's really about the competitive nature of it, because until a customer has an option to move and leave you because of the way they're being treated, then it's tough to get companies to care about customer experience. And so that's kind of the first driving force that I see. And then once you've got that, once people do have a choice, then we could talk about sort of the individual micro things that a company could do to try to spur that on.
Great. Look, and I like that. I like that. I guess the context of how do we inspire and motivate. I guess it's about companies, making themselves more visible in terms of their ability to provide, services, alternatives to customers, that are being serviced by companies that believe that they're running a monopoly, or that they don't need to care or invest in customer experience. As a follow-up, how do we motivate leaders within companies to use customer experience rather as more of a competitive advantage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you said leaders, because customer experience efforts at any company will ultimately fizzle out and fail if leadership isn't backing it. It's really got to be a total commitment. A lot of times in companies that I consult with and companies I've worked at, there's a sort of a pocket, an organic movement for somebody in the company wants to do the right thing for the customer. But, when you get into a large company, one person and one person's motivation and goal can only take you so far. That's why it needs to be a commitment from the top. And so to your question of how do we get leaders? Well, most leaders who are running businesses care about financials, right? I mean, they have a fiduciary obligation to the board to the shareholders. And so, that's one of the ways that I've been able to make persuasive arguments to get those leaders to buy in, because so much, at least in the Western hemisphere, so much of business is all about dollars and cents. It's all about, I make a decision because is this going to be more profitable? It's really rare that a company will make a decision to sacrifice profit in the near term because they believe it will pay off in the long term. Yeah. Amazon is one of those companies that has been doing that, but that's pretty rare. And so the short-term focus is one of the things that really kind of handicaps companies and leaders because they have shareholders to answer to, and they have a stock price to drive. And that is a real big obstacle. But now, Why do I say all that? Because so many times leaders think that engaging in customer experience and doing things that will improve customer experience is a cost. It's an additional burden to the business. But what I'm able to do is actually show them that there's a return on this investment, and that if they spend this much, they should get this much back, because here's what we're trying to drive. And it's really like any other part of the business. When you go through a budgeting process, other functions in the business have for years had to make the case for getting budget. Why should you give me this money? Oh, because I'm going to do this for the business and it's going to generate this return. Well, the CX world, because it's fairly new, we're not very good at that yet. And that's one of the things that I've been able to do, is come up with a return on investment model. And that's one of the things that really I find works with leaders to get them motivated and headed the right direction with CX.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Now you speak and you work with companies around the world. You travel, so envious of you. So what kind of trends are you seeing? Are you identifying that you could potentially share with us in terms of what the rest of the world is doing when it comes to CX?
Yeah. Trends. Well, the trends are, especially in competitive markets, that and with a population that is, the younger population who has pretty much grown up on mobile devices, smartphones with apps, and there is a propensity to switch. Switching is much easier. We talked about competitive marketplaces in the earlier, and so the sort of the demographics of the world, combined with the tools, the technology tools that they're carrying around and they've been raised with, cause them to really be able to switch and pivot quickly when they're not happy. And so that's one big trend. So if you're a company and you think you've got some market nailed down and you're the best, and you just think there's nobody who's ever going to come knock you down, well, that's the most dangerous thought you could have, I think, as a business leader. I just got done working with a company, which is one of the largest mining companies in the world. And they are very proud of what they do, and they're very proud of the quality of what they produce. And they have an attitude that people will just buy them because they're better. And the truth of the matter is that leaves them vulnerable for somebody to come in and at least on the commercial side of their business, come in and actually knock them down. And I think they're starting to open their eyes right now to see what could happen. But it's a really big force. Right now, they have a big force that keeps them thinking that they're the best. And of course, we want to have pride in our company and where we work, and we want to think that we're good and that we're noble and all of that. And so that's just a natural human tendency that you have to fight. So that's one trend, is that that companies tend to think they might be unstoppable or infallible. So that's one trend. And the way that you overcome that is, I think the other trend is this, what we call outside in thinking, as opposed to inside out. Outside in means stepping outside of your role as whatever you do in the company and putting your hat on as a customer and really trying to experience what it's like to be on the other side. Because so many times we spend so much time, so much thought, so much energy working at our company, it's hard for us to imagine what it must be like to be a customer. And so we have to consciously do that. And that's starting to become a trend where leaders in the company are starting to go outside and experience, basically eat their own dog food is one of the expressions that we use. And that's a trend, and that's really helpful in motivating leaders to see what's actually going on, rather than sort of staying in their beautiful office towers and thinking everything's great. Yeah. And if you want to just talk about data and numbers, the numbers are accelerating over the past several years. That I think it's up to 25 or 28% now of customers will leave you after just one bad experience. Wow. One, yeah, and then if over 30% will share it either online or with friends, with social media, and then about 1/5 or 20% they will not trust a company. And so trust is everything when you're talking about loyalty and share of wallet and, who you do business with. And if you all of a sudden can't trust them, you're going to probably hesitate. I'm an Amazon customer and I almost shop for everything on Amazon just because I trust them. It's easy. I know they're big. I know they're a giant. I know they don't care about me as an individual, but they make me feel like they care about me, and they don't hassle me. And so that's the type of experience that I think that is demanded in today's world, because again, combination of, you've got this gigantic, at least in the West, this group we call the millennials. They are, I think the oldest ones are in their early 30s now. So they're coming into their prime earning years. And that group is bigger than the baby boomers, which was the generation immediately after World War II, which was the largest generation, at least in the US and Western history. And the millennials are larger than that, and they're coming into their prime earning years. And they've grown up with smartphones and technology, and they're not afraid to switch. They don't feel like they need to be held captive by businesses. And so that is the big trend. Those things all together kind of spell doom for somebody who wants to live in an old world that doesn't exist anymore.
Wow. And clearly there's so much still coming, and again, millennials are not shy of voicing their opinions, and
right.
And also sharing those opinions, social
absolutely.
platforms and whatnot. Thanks for that. Very interesting stuff. And maybe next time we'll talk about what those trends look like, in the middle of the year or post that. Now, where does a company start? Should they identify or realize that they need to improve customer experience? What's the first thing we look at, and possibly what comes after that?
That's a great question. What I try to do is I take my clients through, if they're just starting out and they don't know what to do, I try to take them through kind of a 3-step process. One of them is kind of discovering who they are and who they want to be. Why do they care about customer experience? Why did they call me to begin with? Did they read about it in a magazine? Or do they, their colleagues, are they doing it and they just feel like, well, I don't want to miss out on this? Or is there a real compelling reason? Like, is there I'm not sure if you're familiar with a U.S. airline called United Airlines. About a year or so ago, they had a terrible public relations incident where they dragged a doctor off of a plane and bloodied him because they had oversold the flight. And so that was terrible. So that would be an example of a company saying, oh my gosh, this was horrible. We cannot do this again. We cannot be associated with this. We've got to fix this. And that might be what we call a burning platform to take action. Now that's pretty rare. It's not as rare as you'd think, but it is fairly rare. Most of the time, it's kind of me too. Everybody's getting on board, another thing is maybe your numbers, your financials, your revenue or your profits are starting to flatline or even go down, and you're wondering why. And then you kind of find your way into this customer experience world. And so that's depending on where you are. Like I said earlier, the top thing, the number one reason is you've got to get your leadership on board, and they have to understand this. Number two is, if this is not the way your company culture is today, as far as being customer centric and doing what's right by the customer, then it becomes a cultural change transformation. And that's hard because we're talking about human beings. We're all people. We all have feelings. We all have motivations. And, the companies we work in set up these incentive systems, whether they're performance management, whether they're bonuses or salaries, what have you. And those drive a lot of our behaviors. And so you have to kind of rethink those. And of course, rethinking those, that can only, changing those can only happen from the top down. The other bit is what we talked about earlier, moving from inside out thinking about what's good for the company, and shifting that to outside in. So that's another thing. And then really breaking down organizational silos. Your customer doesn't care that a particular function is responsible for what's causing their issue, and that you can't do anything about it because you work in this other function. So you have to make those organizational silos that we, traditional businesses have. You have to break those down, or at least to the customer, have them appear to be broken down, and have a way to work through those, as opposed to blaming someone else inside the company. That doesn't really help the customer. So those are some of the big things that you need to do. But I guess first and foremost, KK, is really, why are you doing this? What do you hope to achieve? What do you hope to achieve 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Are you trying to outperform a competitor? Are you trying to change your financials? And then what are the tools, what are the ways that you'd measure that? Because financials to me are an output metric. There are lots of different things you can do to measure along the way on the inside about your customers and how they're feeling and what they're spending with you, that are leading indicators that you can act on. Because that's the other problem, is that if you focus on the outcome, then you miss a lot of what's happening, what's driving that outcome. And by outcome, I mean the financials.
Great. Wow. So many nuggets in just that one question, you know. A little later, I want us to circle back in terms of how everything that we're covering speaks to you know, growing small businesses, because I think superior customer experience would also be key in helping small business to grow. So I know journey mapping is one of your areas of specialization. Can you tell the audience a little bit about what journey mapping is and really the role it plays in customer experience?
Yeah. Absolutely. I alluded to it in the last answer that the approach that I like to take is to discover, you know, why is it that a company wants to embark on a customer experience improvement journey. Once we figure that out and we know where they want to go, then we start to look at, okay, what are areas of the company that they think are broken or not performing well? And then we can use a tool called journey mapping. And journey mapping is simply a lot of companies use the word or term journey mapping, and it means 100 different things to 100 different people. But to me, it really means it's the steps from the customer's point of view, again, outside in. What do they do as they interact with you? What are the steps? What are the things that we make them do? Not the steps that they have to take, the things that we make them do to accomplish the job that they're trying to accomplish. If you're shopping on an e-commerce site, how do I discover you? How do I search for what I'm looking for? How do I sort through and decide which thing I might want to put in my cart? How do I actually go buy it? How do I pay for it? When is it going to arrive? What if there's a problem? All of those things. So that would be a journey. And one of the things that you have to do is, in addition to mapping out that journey, and that's just the map of what a customer would experience, is you have different types of customers. Different customers behave different ways. Different customers may be shopping for different things. And so we have these things called personas. And because if you design an experience for a generic customer, you're going to design a generic experience, which is unremarkable. If you really know your customers and which customers are more important to you, and that's a hard thing for some businesses to do, is to distinguish. Just a common thing I hear is all customers are important. Well, that's true, but some are more important to you than others because maybe they spend a lot more money with you, a lot more time, and maybe there's a segment of customers that you don't have yet, and those would be important to have, but you don't have them yet. And so it's really kind of forcing businesses to make a prioritization. And so once we do this, KK, then we can map the journey, and then we can use all sorts of tools. If they have surveys or any voice of the customer information, we can plot that at different spots along the journey and see where the journey is going well. And then one of the bits that I put on top of it is the emotion. It's not just what's happening. Are customers dropping out? Are they not, are they abandoning their shopping cart online? It's actually, how are they feeling? Are they frustrated? Are they anxious? Are they upset? Are they happy? And so you layer on those emotions on that journey. And then what you end up with at the end is you say, okay, for this journey, for this persona trying to accomplish this job, here's where we see what the range of emotions are. And you use that to then pinpoint and say, oh, we've got problems with our journey here and here and here. And then you can start to dig down into what's causing that. And then you can start to act on it. So that's a shorthand version of what journey mapping is.
Wow. Great. And Stephen, the more I'm interacting with people such as yourself, and obviously the more that I do with companies around customer experience, I'm seeing, a very close relationship between customer experience and branding. Are companies realizing that how much customer experience create the brand experience, and therefore how we need to get, marketing and everybody else within the company to sort of appreciate that and work together to make customer experience to work better and helping companies have a much more positive brand experience. Well, what are your thoughts and or comments around that?
Yeah, absolutely. Remember a couple of minutes ago, I talked about my kind of how I approach things is, why are you doing this? Who do you want to be? And that's kind of another way of saying, what is your brand promise? In other words, what do you want to be associated with your brand? Do you want your brand to be, oh, that's the company that just, they make terrible products and then they don't support them. Or what do you want people to be saying about you? And for sure, the brand promise is, that is, to me, I don't get to interact with that very much because it's hard enough just getting leadership involved and caring about CX and then kind of going to the next level and saying, who are you as a company? And then, reinventing yourself potentially with branding and then all of that falls out from the branding about, who you want to be and what does that take to do to get to where you want to be. That's a huge transformation and a huge commitment.
Sure.
I would say that for companies that are older and more established, that is a very, very difficult transformation. And that's why I really like working with smaller companies because they're just at the very beginning and they're more agile. They can pivot more quickly and they can say, oh my gosh, that's right. Why don't we go forward with this? And this is who we want to be. This is what we want to be known for. It's much easier to do earlier on than when you're a mature company.
And so in your experience, when it comes to journey mapping, what are some of the challenges that you see companies, facing, and potentially mistakes that they would typically make? Can you share with us around your experience on that?
Absolutely. I would say that number one is a lot of companies are hesitant to get real feedback from real customers. I don't know why, but sometimes executives don't want to hear bad news, right? So they just ignore it. And so one of the things that I see that happens that is a big mistake is, again, it's this inside out versus outside in, not really getting what the customer is saying about you or feels about you, but acting on their behalf and saying, oh, this is what our customers think about us. And that might not be the truth. It's probably biased. So that's number one, because think about that. If you do this entire journey mapping exercise and you're doing it with what you think the customer feels and how they are behaving versus how they actually feel, then you're never going to solve the problem because you didn't get the problem right. Yeah. So that's number one. And I would say that at the other end of the spectrum, let's say you do it correctly. And you get the real customer feedback and you really target the places in the journey where you should be focusing on. Once the journey map is done and that information is there, it's kind of insights into action is one of the terms that we use. And it's the action part. People, like someone like me comes in and helps you do a journey map. And then you say, okay, thanks, Stephen, we've got this. And then I go away and then things just stall and the journey map just sits on the wall or sits up on a shelf and there's no action taken. And that's one of the things that I try to offer because of my operations background and the CX background is not only can I help you with your CX and diagnose what's going on, but I can actually sit by your side and roll up my sleeves and help you actually do it because I've done it in real companies before. And so I can actually do the execution piece. And that's the part where so many companies just fail. The consultant leaves and something else happens and something becomes more important and they forget about this.
I guess that's where design sprints come in.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about how you work with companies in terms of your support and assistance, and as you say, how do you help or empower them to then be able to continue doing the work after you've left?
Yeah, it's great, and it's the last piece of my of kind of my approach, which the first part being discovering why they want to improve their CX and who they want to be. The second piece is understanding their customer's journey from their customer's perspective and where they need improvement. And then the last bit, which is that action bit, is I use design sprints, which came out of Google Ventures. Google Ventures is Google's investment arm. They had lots of portfolio companies, and the leaders were seeing similar challenges across the portfolio of the companies that they had invested in, and they wanted to try to find a way to, kind of like you're doing, accelerate these small companies to get to where they need to be. and they want to do it so quickly because so many times in companies there's a lot of talk and no action. And this is a way. A design sprint is, if you don't know what it is, it comes out of Google Ventures. It used to be a 5-day, now it's kind of compressed to 4 days. It's a 4-day process to rapidly solve big challenges, whether that's creating a new product or improving existing ones. And it compresses, here's the thing, it compresses potentially months of work into a few days. If you've been at a larger company, or it doesn't even have to be a large company, but so many times people just sit around and talk, and no action gets done, or no decision gets made. The structure of a design sprint is kind of a combination of the design thinking, the agile software development methodology, and then operational excellence. It kind of combines those three things. And I like to say, if those three had a baby together, it would be a design sprint. And so it combines this rigor, this discipline with the sort of open thinking of design thinking. And in 4 days, you go from understanding where the problem is that you want to work on, which we already have that from the customer journey mapping bit, coming up with solutions, and trying to use kind of parallel, look at other companies that maybe have done something similar, use that as a reference, and then coming up with the challenge that you want to solve, the solution set that you want to go after. And then on days 3 and 4, you actually build a prototype. And this is not just a minimum viable product, something scribbled on a piece of paper. This is actually designers getting in there, especially if you're working in the digital realm, creating a high fidelity prototype, something that you could put on your phone, an app that you could put there, and actually push the buttons. Nothing's happening on the background, but you're getting the experience as a user that you would. And you do that on day 3. And then on day 4, you actually bring in 5 customers. You don't have to physically bring them in. You can do this remotely like we're doing right now. And you actually take them through it and you observe them. And not only is one person sitting there kind of guiding them through and observing what they're doing, but the rest of the sprint team, which is about 6 to 8 people, are watching on video to watch, the subtle things, the facial expressions, the non-verbal gestures, to see if this resonates. And there's research that shows that if you test your prototype with 5 customers or 5 people, that you will be able to quickly identify trends of whether or not you hit the mark with what you're trying to solve, or whether you need to go back. And then we do what we call an iteration sprint the next week, which is it's a shorter one. It's 2 or 3 days. And that is really a way where at the end of 4 days, best case, but maybe 7 or 8 days, worst case, you go from not really sure how you're going to solve a problem to coming up with a real prototype that's tested with real customers, and you get real feedback about whether it's going to work. If you nail that, then what you do is you say, okay, this is what we need to build, and then you take it into whatever development mechanism you use, whether that's agile or waterfall or however you develop your products. Then you take that in there. But what it does is it greatly increases the odds that what you're going to build is going to solve your customer's problem. How many times do companies, waste time trying to figure out what they're going to build? They go build it and spend 6 months and millions of dollars on it, and they go to market with it and it falls flat. It's not what the customer wants. This short circuits that and gives you the best chance to do that. And that's how I kind of finish things up with my clients.
Oh, and on that note, Stephen, then again, thanks for sharing. Any last words for companies? And I'm talking small, medium companies, and obviously all the way to big companies that have identified the need to improve their customer experience. Yeah,
I would say number one, always obsess about the customer. Amazon has these 14 leadership principles that they've had since day one. Number one is obsess about the customer. So adopt that, hire people, bring them in, make sure that people are behaving that way, create the incentives that way. If somebody solves a customer's problem and it costs a little more money than you want, don't fire them for that. Just coach them and say that was the right thing to do. Let's figure out a less expensive way to do it next time. Right. But you have to develop that culture, and it's so important to do it while a company is smaller, because it's nearly impossible to do with large companies. You can only do it in pockets. And I would say never forget about the customer, because they're the one that's actually paying your salary. They're the one that's keeping you afloat. And if you forget about them, then you risk everything. And the world that we live in today is different than the one we lived in 20 years ago. And it's gonna be more painful if you don't do that. And that's, I think, my number one piece of advice for a small to medium-sized company.
Beautiful. And where are you speaking around the world over the next few months? Where can we expect to see you?
Well, I think I'll be back in Cape Town, Johannesburg, in I think March. I don't have the dates nailed down yet. March and then in the summer, and then I'll be in London again, Customer Experience World. Those are the ones that I have on the docket now, but it's all coming. That's why this week I've taken a sort of slow week to try to nail all that down for when I'm going to be traveling and speaking versus when I'm going to be working with my clients. So, but you can always follow what I have to. What I think about customer experience at my Twitter handle, which is at Customer Matters, and that's Matters with a Z. My daughter told me that's edgy. So, plus some woman in New Zealand had Customer Matters with an S. So,
Great,
and you can always.
Great. I'll make sure to write that up on the screen so people can see.
Great.
And is Twitter the best way for people to get a hold of you? Do you prefer email? What works best?
Email works great, and it's Steven, STEVEN, at Customer Matters, that's with an S, .io, and I'll send you that as well. Great,
thank you. Steven, I really appreciate it, and when you do come to South Africa, if it's before we connect again, please let us know, and maybe we'll do another version of this interview in person. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to learn and to see what's happening. But yeah, I'll be in touch. And again, I appreciate your time, my brother. Have the best of 2019. Just all the best to your success, and say hi to your family and obviously your colleagues. And I look forward to interacting with you again.
All the same to you, KK, and best of luck with the accelerator. And please let me know if anything I can do to help. I think what you're doing is admirable, and I would love to support it in any way I can.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, folks, that was Stephen Carlton from Customer Matters. I will be putting up, his contact details on the screen, if not already. Obviously, this is pre-editing, and I'm sure we would have done that by now. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the interview. And if you have any questions around customer experience, customer success, do get in touch with me. I can always, link up with people like Stephen and other colleagues in this space, and we can help you implement customer experience for the purpose of growing your business. And wishing you all the best for 2019 as well. And I hope to see you joining us in our next interview, which I'll keep you posted on. So yeah, thanks, Stephen. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers, KK.
All right.